following discussion is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease. Please do not apply any of this information without first speaking with your doctor.
What is up, everyone, and welcome to the Diabetes Podcast, where we discuss how to take control of your health and gain the freedom to live the life that you deserve. I'm Garrett, and with me is my co-host, Dr. Grady and Dr, who is a board-certified chiropractic internist. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Diabetes Podcast. Here with us today, we have a very special guest and very excited to dive into his story. Brandon Mouw is an amazing human being, and he's actually working on a book that's come out sometime in the near future, kind of detailing just his entire story and what he hopes to give to the world. And so without further ado, we'll just kind of let Brandon take over and tell us a little bit about yourself. But thanks, Brandon, so much for being on the podcast.
Hey, thank you very much for having me. A little bit about myself. I was diagnosed as a diabetic at the age of 3. I'm currently 36, and I was a well-controlled diabetic for almost my entire life until a kidney stone hit me and kind of threw everything for a loop in my late 20s. And so I've experienced the gambit when it comes to health and diabetes side effects and going through all of that kind of stuff. So it's been quite a journey.
Wow. We'll get into kind of everything leading up to the kidney stone and everything there afterwards in just a second. But you know, in terms of diabetes, is this, are you right now more focused on diabetes, or is it more just organ? I guess spoiler alert for the story with you've had an organ transplant 2 years ago, but are you more focused on just reaching out to people, or what are you trying to get across to so many people right now with your story?
Motivation to keep going no matter what. And it's not specifically for diabetics. It's not specifically for organ transplant patients. It's not specifically for anyone. It's for everyone within the chronic illness community, because all autoimmune diseases, all people of every shape and size, and from wherever you're at in life, it health and wellness and illness affects everybody. And so that's kind of who I speak to. And just because I dealt with diabetes for so long and stuff like that, that is what is most common to me and what is most easy for me to talk about.
Gotcha. So let's kind of dive into maybe everything leading up to, that moment with the kidney stone. So you're diagnosed at 3 years old, and how was that, growing up and living with diabetes? How was that experience for you?
I have nothing negative to say about it. I don't feel like I am a victim of something. It doesn't run in my family, so it was like a big surprise. My parents did very well at taking care of me. They instilled very good habits in me. I didn't meet another diabetic until I went to a diabetic camp in 3rd grade. When I was growing up as a diabetic, diabetes was seen as something really negative. It had really negative connotations with it. And you didn't tell people you were a diabetic. And so growing up with it was fine. I assimilated very well, and I didn't let diabetes control me. I controlled diabetes, and I lived life with it. But I did it with very helping parents, where I was able to play sports. I was able to do pretty much anything I wanted, but my parents always kept an eye on me. because of that low blood sugar, or just in case. They always had something backed up. So like my dad would be the coach of any sports that I played or any games I was playing. One of my parents were always there. If I was at a friend's house, someone was there to watch me, or we'd had friends over at my house instead. And, you know, you just, as a kid, you just, you moderate, you change plans accordingly, to fit a diabetic's lifestyle without making other people feel bad for you being a diabetic. And that's just how I grew up. Everything was fine. And I would say it was like that until about age 16, when I got on the insulin pump. And that's when things like drastically changed. Because before then I was on NPH and R. N and R. Those are the two insulins I was on until I was age 16, when they got fast acting insulin out on the market.
Wow. So with growing up in sports and not using a pump and just using injections, so that was pretty easily manageable, you think? You know, there wasn't too many complications at that time?
I would say it was managed the same. It was a lot less involved, because when it came down to it, it came down to me making sure that I ate enough food. It didn't have to do with carb counting. It was just making sure you ate enough food to cover that insulin that you took every day, that was in your system, that lasted the 8 hours. And if there was a low, that you had the appropriate way to treat it. And in the meantime, whatever your blood sugar was, it kind of it just worked itself out. There were no such thing as corrections. And then when the pump and stuff came out, it drastically changed. Everything counted. Everything you put in your mouth mattered, and you had a bolus for everything. And you had, and so it really changed the way that I started to manage my diabetes. I was always well controlled, and the pump definitely helped me become better controlled as a diabetic, because then I could keep better track of everything.
Gotcha. Grady, you got any questions based off that?
Yeah, so you said with the two insulins that you were taking beforehand, they were kind of the medium acting insulins. So essentially you were taking the same dosage every day, and so you just worried about eating the proper amount of food to cover that. So really your insulin didn't change, it was just maybe your eating habits changed around it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then and then the things that would change it is if it was a day where I was playing sports, or I was working on the farm a lot, it wasn't something where it was like, oh, like, you know, you just burned however many calories. It was, you have to make up for it with this many carbohydrates. It was like, oh, you better eat an orange, and here's some peanut butter. And you kind of just make up, you just knew how your body would react.
I see.
With the older insulins. And then when they kind of like dialed things in with the faster acting insulins, it changed the way diabetes is managed, or was managed completely. I
see. Okay.
So then once you got on the pump, everything mattered, right? So was that then harder than to control? You said that was like a turning point then in kind of the story, was 16, insulin pump. What about that was so drastic?
Well, instead of doing the injections, I suddenly had this thing I had attached to me at all times. Mm-hmm. When I got them, we didn't have all the extra gadgets and gizmos, and my cartridge would fall out all the time, or it would just get ripped out of my stomach a lot. There's a lot of issues with it. But when it worked well, it worked really well. And I couldn't get the insulin pump wet, but I wore it for 6 years. And so I liked it enough, and it controlled my insulin enough to the point where the doctors they only wanted to see me once a year. And if I had a problem, I would give them a call. Like, my A1C couldn't have been better. They called me a perfectly well controlled diabetic, and that whatever I was doing, just keep on doing it. And so it didn't affect my life. I think the insulin pump definitely improved my life in terms of blood sugars and stuff like that. But then it kind of adds that magnification and intensification of keeping that blood sugar at that 100 level. Like, ooh, nope, has to be 100. Oh, nope, I'm not 100. Let me correct, has to be 100. Where kind of before that, you were just, 150, you were okay. 85, you're good. And so it kind of changed. I think you become a little more involved with insulin pumps and like the CGMs and stuff like that than if you just do regular blood test and injection.
Mm-hmm. So now are you still on a pump? Well, I guess it's skipping a lot of parts of the story, but you don't use a pump if you've had this transplant then, right? You don't do any of that kind of stuff?
Correct. The transplant makes me non-insulin, a non-dependent. I'm no longer dependent on insulin, so a non-insulin dependent person. So therefore, I am no longer a diabetic. My diabetes has been put on pause. So as long as this transplant keeps working, my body is making insulin. And so I have two pancreases. I have two pancreases in me. One doesn't work at all, and one's making up the insulin for me. But yeah, so even to this day, I still, like you mentioned earlier, like I had the transplant. It's been 2 years since I had it. I still when I look at things that I'm buying them at the store, I buy the same stuff I ate when I was a diabetic. I look at the carbs. It's something so ingrained in you from the age of 3 when you do that for so long that that's a hard habit to break.
I imagine, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, because there's always that age-old question for diabetic, like if you could take a shot or take a pill and just like wish away your diabetes, would you? And you're in a situation where it's not, but it is. Like, I think the word you used was perfect because I painted a really clear picture of when you said it's on pause, because the what ifs are there, right? And so I think that's a really good descriptor, or at least it was for me. Like I feel like that's a good insight on your mindset with everything. But you actually get to live oh well, now I don't technically have to count carbs. You still do, but because like you said, it's a habit kind of thing.
Yeah, and with the situation leading up to me needing this transplant, it wasn't because this is something novel. It wasn't like, oh, I had the chance to get a transplant. No, the transplant saved my life, and I went through hell to get it. And so if there was a shot or a pill that would have cured my diabetes, I would have done it in a heartbeat. But the transplant is not the way to do it. Let me just tell you that.
Wow. All right. So now let's kind of back up a bit. So you're 16, you got up on a pump. So now where does the story go leading up to, whether it be the kidney stone or anything even before that? Where does the story go once you're 16 now using a pump?
Yeah, so life just as normal. I graduated high school. I worked for a couple of years trying to figure out life. Then I went to college. Then I became a high school social studies teacher. And then after doing that for 3 years, it wasn't right for me. I didn't feel fulfilled, and I didn't know what to do. And a friend of mine had just graduated law school and said, you should go to law school. And I was like, I grew up on a farm, right? There's no way I'm smart enough to go to law school. But I studied, and I took the LSATs, and I applied for colleges, and I got in, and I went to law school. And, I just was living my life. And midway through my law school career, I got a kidney stone. And when I went into the hospital, it turns out that it was 2 kidney stones the size of a thumbnail. So I don't know like what in terms of measurement, how many millimeters that is. They told me. but they're like, look at your thumbnail. That's what you got stuck. 2 of them stuck in your kidney. You're septic. We have to go in and remove them. And having to go in and remove that caused such damage to my kidney that it destroyed it. And they ended up having to go in. They did 6 more surgeries. Then they finally removed the kidney altogether. And so as a diabetic, I was like, you can't take a kidney. Do not take my kidney. I already got 30 years of this disease on this kidney. Don't take it. And I didn't have a choice. And then that's when everything changed in my life. When they took that kidney out, which was supposed to fix all the issues that I was having because the kidney was scarred from the kidney stones. They didn't know what caused them. They didn't know how long they had been there. My other kidney is just fine. But what messing with the kidney is kind of what started messing up my diabetes.
Mm. So how long was that process of just taking care of the kidney?
A year and a half.
Okay. So yeah, quite a long time. And that was 6 surgeries?
Yep.
Wow.
6 surgeries.
Wow. So then the kidneys, you said working on that started to impact your diabetes. So what then led into the next part?
So it turned me into it turned me from a well-controlled diabetic where the doctors didn't even need to see me because I was, quote, too perfect of a patient, to me not being able to control my blood sugar. And I was dealing with hypoglycemia to the point where I would just be sitting at work and I would pass out, or or a whole day would go by and I would forget the entire day. Because you guys know what a low blood sugar feels like. You get confused. I try to explain it to people. Imagine just being, blackout drunk and trying to come back from that. Like you don't know what happens. You don't know what you did. You can't remember everything. It's kind of like you're outside of your body and all of that kind of stuff. So I knew that was a problem about 6 months after it really started getting bad, because I was in the courtroom. I was working as a law clerk, and I was in the courtroom, and I could feel myself going low, and I went to grab one of my Gatorades, which was like my emergency juice type of juice, sugary drink that I would drink, and it was all gone. And then I dug in my other pocket where I always kept candy, Starburst and Mentos and stuff like that, and that was all gone. And I'm not the type of person that just forgets to refill things. What ended up happening was throughout that day, I had used everything. And it wasn't like I wasn't giving myself too much insulin. It wasn't because I wasn't eating. It just, my body wasn't responding to what was going on correctly. And so that is when I knew that there was a problem going on, and my body wasn't reacting like it was supposed to, wasn't reacting how it did before. And that's when I really started getting concerned with my diabetes and my diabetes management, and needed to start going to more doctors.
Yeah. So at the time you were still on the pump, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm curious. I'm assuming you were trying to play with your basal rates and all that stuff to try and combat all these lows.
Yep. We did everything. And at the time, this was when CGMs just started coming out. So they really weren't that good in terms of like detecting low blood sugars and all that kind of stuff. They would alarm you. But what was happening to me is I would go from a completely normal blood sugar to something where I would go unconscious within less than a minute. And so the CGM is about 8 to 10 minutes behind live time. And if that's happening within a minute, it's not even giving me helpful information. All it's doing is showing the doctors what my blood sugars are doing. So I would have to rely on finger sticks and that kind of stuff. And that worked for a little while, but you can only test yourself so many times out of fear. And then I looked into getting a diabetic alert dog, and I got a diabetic alert dog, and that helped me out significantly with the low blood sugars. So I was having 8 to 10 low blood sugars to the point of passing out per day.
Wow.
That's how bad it was getting. And so we ended up taking me off of the insulin pump because we thought it was the insulin, and we put me on 2 units of Lantus only per day. And I was still going into the 40s every single day with my blood sugar. And I was eating full meals and doing everything that I could, and we couldn't figure it out. They didn't know what was going on.
Did you ever go high?
I would go high, and that was the thing. And they said, we want you to stay high. Like, we want you to stay in the 300s. Like, if we can keep you in the 300s for 2 or 3 months, maybe we can reset your system. And that was, and that was like one of the goals, but we couldn't. I could get into the 300s, and then 30 minutes later I would be in the 40s. And it's just, and eventually they told me like what brittle diabetes was. And it's just that you're unable to control your blood sugar, and your body just doesn't respond as it's supposed to, whether it be hypo or hyperglycemia. And my issue was with hypos. And sadly, one bad hypoglycemia episode will kill you. And that's why it's so dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just even trying to wrap my mind around being so high and then dropping so low so fast. So the docs had no hypothesis, no like thoughts that they communicate to you why this could be happening. That's at first I thought you were saying passing out. I was like, maybe your blood pressure was just all out of whack with your kidneys, one kidney being gone. But it's definitely, blood sugar related, as you said. So what were they trying to communicate to you at this time? They just had a bunch of question marks, or what was their best guess?
They thought it was other autoimmune diseases. So we started going through the checklist of just getting everything off and testing for it all. Then I would see nephrologist, urologist. You name the type of doctor, I saw them. Could it be a neurological infection where my body wouldn't respond correctly to insulin? And eventually, when my nephrologist and regular my endocrinologist, my diabetic doctor, really kind of started talking, what they found out was the turning point was the kidney. And so with the kidney stone. So what about the kidney stone made things different? And when I had to go through all those surgeries, it was 6 of them. And the 7th one is when they removed it, is every time I was septic. So it was poisoning my body. Every time they had to go in and work on the kidney and do things, which then made me have the hypoglycemia episodes and stuff like that. And that started damaging my other kidney. So the theory that they finally came up with is that my body, because of the hypoglycemia, it wasn't, when my body would come back online, when the brain would turn everything back on, it wasn't doing it correctly. So therefore, my stomach wasn't digesting food enough or correctly enough to break it down properly for the insulin to attach to deliver it throughout my body to create energy. And so it was one of those things where they couldn't directly diagnose it, but the idea that they had was that my body wasn't breaking down food correctly enough because of having too many hypoglycemia episodes. And because my one kidney was being damaged from all the hypoglycemia, the kidney itself wasn't processing insulin the way that it normally should. And so the two things kind of made just the perfect storm for the brittle hypoglycemia unawareness.
Wow. So prior to the surgeries, you had no other autoimmunities, right?
Correct.
Wow. What a drastic change. So you already said that from point one surgery with the kidney stone to the last kidney surgery. That was over the course of a year and a half.
Yep.
So what was going on then outside of the hospital? At that moment, what were you trying to live life like? I mean, that seems pretty miserable and self-consuming, going through all that.
I was living life as normal as possible. I finished law school. I was working. I had my diabetic alert dog with me. I thought everything was good. My diabetic alert dog was catching lows. I was only passing out a few times a week. I thought I was doing great. But when the doctors would see me, they're like, Brandon, like, how are you standing in front of me? Like, how is this even possible? But mentally, I was like, no, like, I need to get back to life. I have life to live. This is not going to stop me. But really, I was running myself into the ground by just pushing my body way too hard. And that probably played a role in it as well. And yeah, but in terms of doctors, you name it, gurus, every naturopath, anyone you could think of, I tried and I went and I attempted everything, because I said, this is ridiculous. I went from my entire life being well controlled, being able to handle this, and now we can't, no matter what, if I were to do the same exact thing every single day, even as a diabetic, there is no guaranteed outcome of what's going to happen. Now there's no guaranteed outcome of what's going to happen in the next minute with me. And so when you're starting to deal with that, you start gaining a lot of anxiety and fear. And then you get to a point where you can't drive anymore. You get to a point where you can't work anymore. And when doctors don't have answers for you, you're kind of left in this state of fear of, what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? Like, the people who are supposed to help me kind of don't want to help me because I'm a liability to them. They have no answers for me. So that's when doctor shopping really became a popular term for me, because I made an appointment with every single doctor I could possibly think of and find. And I would go to every appointment to see what they had to say. And finally, it took almost 2 years. And I walked into a new doctor's office. It was this little doctor's office. Walked into the room and I was sat down, and the doctor came in and she sat down. She had her iPad with her with all my records. And she says, Brandon, I've seen one patient like you. Most of us endocrinologists never see this in our entire life. We barely learn about it. It's called brittle hypoglycemia unawareness. And you have it. We don't know why you get it or what ends up happening. We don't know what's going on in your body. But all we know is that if you don't find a way to cure it or be able to handle it, you're going to die in less than 2 years. And my recommendation for you is to get a pancreas-only transplant, because that is the only solvent to your problem. And so it was kind of like, she just laid it out right there on the table and told me exactly what I needed to do. And that was the first time I really heard pancreas-only transplant, and that it was the solvent for the low blood sugar issue, and that I truly was a brittle diabetic. And she lit a fire under my ass to start looking into things again and to start trusting doctors and to have hope, because before that it was just, I was surviving, and that's not a fun way to live.
Yeah, I imagine there's a lot of mixed feelings in that appointment of, you already had a lot of fear and just being scared and helpless because you can't find the answers anywhere else. But then I'm sure it was really nice just to hear somebody confidently saying to you what your problem was and what you needed to do about it.
Yeah, I needed to hear that. Like, I really needed that. And it was so interesting because she didn't even meet me, and she came in the room and sat down and just like stated it. Like, she just flat out stated it. And it was one of those things. If you don't get this done, you will be dead in less than 2 years. And she also was the one that said, this wouldn't be a problem if you had brittle diabetes and it was hyperglycemia, where your blood sugar was high all the time, because there are other ways that we can get your blood sugar down. But hypoglycemia, one of them, one bad one, and she goes, you've had too many of those already, but one of them could just kill you flat out.
Mhm.
And she said, that's no way to live. And like basically everything in my head, the way I was thinking, she basically said for me. I didn't have to tell her. I didn't have to ask her. She knew exactly what to do. And it was the first time in a very long time that I felt actually cared for medically. And that doctor had my best interest in her mind, and gave me proper medical advice on what to do. And had it not been for that appointment, I probably would have, I don't know. I don't think any other doctor would have recommended that, because a pancreas-only transplant is super rare, and it's not normally taught in diabetic communities, because it's very frowned upon, because they're not successful, or not very successful.
And I think that's one of the, at least I've gotten that a lot growing up and throughout my diabetic life of, well, like, why don't you just get a transplant? Like, why don't you just get a new pancreas? And you don't even need to be like really involved in the medical side of things to just know that that's not an option, or else they'd be offering left and right, like it'd be way more common. There's a reason why it's not. And so at this point, once you heard that, you had all these emotions flushing through your head. So after that appointment, what was your mindset? What was your thought process right then once you left that office?
I was ready to get back to life. Immediately I was like, okay, what do I have to do? Like, what are this, like, who do I talk to? What steps do I take? Where do I go? What do I do? And it came down to, so here's the steps. If you need a transplant, a doctor has to recommend you to a transplant hospital. That doctor has to be able to have privileges to that hospital. And so she was able to recommend me to one hospital in Arizona. And it's not a very good hospital. They're the ones that messed up my kidney and did all the kidney surgeries. And so immediately I was like, oh, heck no, I don't want to go to them. But at least I'll find out some information.
Yeah.
But they refused to see me or they denied me candidacy before even seeing me as a patient, because I only had 50% kidney function, because I had only one kidney. And I didn't, the insurance didn't cover a pancreas-only transplant. So because I couldn't prove I had the funds up front, they wouldn't consider me for transplant. And so those are the two things that I was up against, and that I now had to overcome in terms of, in addition to the hypoglycemia.
Wow. So at that moment then, well, before I go into the insurance denial part, the kidney and only having 50% kidney functionality, their biggest concern there was recovery and being able to handle a surgery and coming out after that, correct? They didn't want you going in and just start messing around and not being able to recover, and blood pressure and all these things. That was why that tick was there, correct? Is that what they communicated to you?
They didn't communicate that to me, but my nephrologist communicated that to me. They wouldn't at the time. It's so what it comes to transplants is because they're done in private hospitals. Private hospitals thrive on numbers of success, and they only want to give you a transplant if they know it's going to be successful. So it's a very political type system where you have to play the cards right. And kidney function with two kidneys was 50%. They didn't realize that I had lost a kidney, and when you put my age into it, and at the time I think I was 30. So when you put my age into it, that wasn't taken into account. But yes, basically what you're saying is kind of what the nephrologist said. But he says that's total nonsense, because anyone my age can recover from surgery. And so he And so the nephrologist is the person who recommended me to Mayo Clinic in Arizona. And they're the ones that ended up taking care of me. And they saw the bigger picture. And the Mayo Clinic is a private hospital as well. And they are more willing to take on riskier patients, knowing that they can have a successful outcome. And so had I not been in contact with that doctor who referred me to the right Mayo Clinic, you know, who knows what would have happened as well. Because he's like he was my kidney doctor since the kidney transplant. He was really good. And the first thing he said, he goes, "What? Of course your kidney functions 50%. You only have one kidney. That means it's doing great." And so like his outlook was just so much different. And so that again, it lit a spark under me, because it just continued to fuel the fire of, okay, don't give up on this yet. There's still hope. And so then he had admitting powers to Mayo Clinic, and he as a nephrologist sent me over there for a pancreas-only transplant, not my endocrinologist, my kidney doctor. So it's kind of funny how it all worked out. And that's when I found out, at Mayo Clinic that, well, the first appointment was $1,800 just to even be seen, to see if they would consider me to be, I had to pay cash for that, to see if they would consider me to go on for the process. And then when I was told that they would need $20,000 up front to go through all of the process to see if I would even be considered like healthy enough to receive a transplant. And then once I was determined to be healthy enough to receive a transplant, they would need $250,000 up front to put me on the transplant list and to pay for the transplant.
Holy cow.
Wow. So before the story of how you reacted to those finances, before you heard those numbers, what do you think kept your mindset so positive? It almost sounded like bit by bit after each incident, a little bit of your hope was getting eaten away.
Yep. But
you were still looking forward and seeing light in some way. So up to this point, you know, what internal drive did you have that made that possible? You know, you were getting punched left and right nonstop for years. What kept you going even up to this far at this point in the story?
You know, there's this song that I like to compare it to, and it's called "I Lived" by One Republic, and it's about like falling down and getting back up, and no matter what, always being able to say "I lived." And in the music video, they interview a young guy. I don't know, he's maybe 14, 15 years old with cystic fibrosis, and showing him living life to the fullest, even though he knows he has a short life ahead of him, even with lung transplant and stuff like that. And so that was one of the things that I looked at, that I like to compare it to, as I had that attitude where, you know, I could have died at any moment. Anything could have taken me out, whether it be a car or a low blood sugar. But I wanted to live. If I would have died, I wanted to say that I lived the life the best that I absolutely could. And so for me to fight every day, even though the hope was being taken away from me, was me trying to live the best I could and say that I lived for that day. I did the best I could, and I would have no regrets. And that was my mindset, and that is what got me through it. And had I not had that, I don't think I would have been able to make it, because you can only handle so many blows in life. And when you're laying down and you still get kicked constantly, you know, you reach a point where you just can't take it anymore. And I was getting there. And that's when I found the doctor who told me about the transplant. And then it wasn't like, oh, this guaranteed fix. It was like a possibility. And then, you know, and then to get told no again, then it kind of like took all that hope away. And then I talked to another doctor, and it kind of like lit it back up. And so it's like a horse race of that give and take of the horse, you know, going back and forth, like what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Can it happen? But at least I know that every day I gave it my all, and that if I didn't make it any further, I could have said I did it with no regrets. I did my best.
Memento mori. Remember that you're mortal. Wow. That's crazy. Yeah. And that reminded me too of, I think it was Rocky 4. No, Rocky 5. I don't know, where he's teaching his son how to box. And he's all like, it ain't about how hard you get hit. It's how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward, how much you can take and keep moving forward. And that's exactly what you were doing. You were getting towards your limit, but if you keep going and keep going, eventually you'll hit that, that jackpot, that sweet spot, which that, one endocrinologist that recommended that surgery was that sweet spot for you. So that's amazing that you're able to just have that mindset leading up to this point. Now, this is only, I would imagine, halfway through your challenges. Like, there's still much more to go that life has for you, but that's amazing that you made it to that far and were able to hold on for so long.
Yeah. And it's not like, I'm so special. Every day was this victory. It was like, no, this frickin' sucks. But, I woke up today and I'm going to give it my all. Also, I just got done with law school. Like I have this whole life to live. This is my second career. I haven't even stepped toe into what the potential of life could be like next for me. And like that, that was a big driving factor in life. And being prevented from doing so many things. I'm like, well, I'm going to make up for it. And so like, I would change that mindset from feeling like a victim or feeling like I missed out on so much to say, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to do the best that I can today. And when I get the opportunity, I am going to take advantage of it. I'm not going to let it go. I'm not going to let it pass. That really is, I don't know where it came from. I don't know what influence it was precisely on me, but that's just how my mindset was. The aspect was life hadn't been lived enough yet, and I had more to go. And it proved it correct every day that I woke up. Like it like reinstilled that. The sun rises every day, no matter what I do or do not do. And I can at least count on that. Like there's always something I can count on. And so even that kept me going at times.
Wow. Simply amazing. So you had this mindset now, and then you sat down, you made it to the Mayo Clinic in Arizona, paid $1,800 for your first visit. You had a $20,000 bill just to get tested. And then they sat you down and said, you need $250,000 up front just to be on the transplant list. So then how does this story continue from there?
Yeah. So the question then comes up like, well, then how do you get $250,000 when you don't come from money? You have $250,000 in student loans. You don't, you know what I mean? You're not working. You can't work. You can't get a loan. I saw my car maybe get $3,000. Like, you really, you rack your brain. And I had to move in with somebody because my blood sugars were so bad that if I wasn't up in the morning, they would come and check on me to see if I was alive. Like it was bad. And so, she was really good. So what she said is, oh, we got to put you on GoFundMe. And I was like, are you crazy? I am not telling people do not need to know that I am going through this. Like, no, this is just crazy. And she goes, nope, you have to go on GoFundMe. And I said, absolutely not. I'm never going to do that. Because I grew up not telling people I was a diabetic. No one knew I was a diabetic. It was looked down upon if I was a diabetic. You were discriminated against because you were a diabetic. Because no one understood what diabetes was. The assumption is that you do it to yourself and you have something wrong with you. And so all of a sudden, I didn't want the world or the internet to know that I was suffering and I was at this point of death. But she broke me down enough, and my mom was talking to me as well, and she just said, well, what do you have to lose? Like seriously, like what do you have to lose by just making it public?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, my dignity, my pride, being embarrassed. And she goes, yeah, well, what does it matter? And I was like, you know what? You're right. And so I wrote up a letter explaining exactly everything that I had been through, all of the options, what all the doctors said, what I could do, what I tried to do. And my roommate made the GoFundMe. And then I also sent letters to close friends and family. And one of my expectation of people at the time was no one gave a crap. That they would think that this is just a bunch of BS and no one would want to help. And I didn't expect them to help, because who wants to give hard-earned money to something that isn't guaranteed, or someone they don't even know? And here they think that I'm like this successful attorney. But we made it go live, and nothing really happened. And that was my expectation. And then I got a call from a family member who said a lot of really not nice things. And it was kind of like, how dare you bring shame on the family by making that public, and stuff like that. And that was my expectation of what was going to happen. And then a few days later, I received a $20,000 anonymous donation to get that first part of to see if I could qualify for surgery donated. And that's what got the ball rolling. So I called Mayo Clinic and I said, I got $20,000. When can I get my first appointment? And they said, okay, well, bring us a check. I said, I'll bring you cash. And so I got them the money, and within 2 days I had the appointments to start going and having that test done where they give you that stuff on the treadmill with the heart. And I had to have x-rays and MRIs and all kinds of psychological evaluations and surgical evaluations and all that kind of stuff. And it turns out that I would make a great transplant candidate. I just needed $250,000. And so then once people kind of heard that someone randomly gave me the money, and to do that, then other people started sharing and donating. And I got calls from people whose family members went through similar things, who had other organs done, and they had such a hard time with insurance, and they knew what I was going through. And that's when I kind of found out that there was a community of people out there who cared. And there's a community of people out there who have been through things that you would never think of or never know because they didn't tell anybody else. And I wasn't alone in this fight. There were other people rooting for me. And it really changed my perspective on life and of people, because I thought that people were just out for themselves. And this proved all of that wrong. And in 3 months, I raised the $250,000 and sent it over to Mayo Clinic. And I was listed the next day. I was actively listed the next day for transplant when they got that money.
Wow. That's gotta be one heck of a great feeling, especially, I mean, to be able to do it. I mean, 3 months, I'm sure felt like forever, but I feel like that was a pretty good time frame to raise that much money. And I'm sure that just felt great, just not only being able to do something that you wanted and needed to do, but then to have all that support from people that you knew and maybe didn't even know. And just, I bet it made you just feel loved and appreciated.
Yeah, and it was crazy because had it not been for social media, that never would have happened. Had it not been me taking that step of vulnerability, having nothing to lose, it never would have happened. Had it not been for friends, family, strangers, just everybody rooting for me, which was so weird. And I'm like, I've always been self-sufficient. Like, this is just weird. But it was so, like, being or feeling like it was okay to be sick, like it was okay. People understood it. Was a really great relief. and getting all the messages and people saying we're praying for you and people saying we're thinking about you and people saying we want to, like we want to know more about you, and just all that kind of stuff just blew my mind, because I'm thinking, you have your own life to live. Like, why are you, why would you want to know more about me, or why would you think about giving money to me? And I didn't question it, but it definitely showed me a different side of humanity, where I thought that everybody only cared about themselves, only cared about the car they drive, only cared about the clothes that they wore, in a consumption society. And it really changed my perspective that humans are a human society and they care about each other. And it was pretty amazing. And so I know that it's not a normal thing to be able to raise $250,000 in 3 months, because if you look at most people's GoFundMe's, you can't do that unless you go viral, like in the news, or you got celebrities supporting you and stuff like that. It doesn't happen. This happened, and it was, to me, it was meant to be. And I took it for what it was. I'm not questioning it. This is me. This is me saying how thankful I am for everything and what I went through during that time. And then to get that phone call saying that I was actively listed, it was just like a breath of fresh air. It was like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe this. This is, I was told by so many people, even at Mayo Clinic, of how impossible it was to get a pancreas-only transplant because it's so rare, and they rarely do them. They don't like to do them because they're not super successful. And they've never seen anyone in my position before, and no one has ever raised the money for their surgery. Everyone says they're going to do it, and it's just impossible. You can't do it. And I did it, and they listed me, and it felt very good, and I felt vindicated for all the negative people around me in my time of sickness. And instead of it being an encouragement, it was always just like this. They wanted to bring you down a little bit more. It felt good. It felt good on their end, because it's kind of like, you're getting your expectations too high. Lower them a little bit. It's impossible for it to happen. And it was like, I want to prove you wrong. So I think all that kind of played into it, of me not giving up, because it would have been much easier, or it could have at any moment happened where I just said, I'm not going to take the extra time tonight to make sure I have every checks and balance system in, to get up and set my alarm for every hour, and to drink my juice, and to make sure I wake up when my dog wakes me up, and to make sure I told my roommate what's going on. Like, there's so many things that could have gone wrong, or I just could have given up at any time, and I didn't. And I am so glad that I did not.
Wow. Yeah, you had a lot of opportunities to bow out and quit so far into this road that you traveled on. So many times where you could have stopped. And as a diabetic, type 1 or 2, there's simple things that you got to do. Not checking your sugar every like 10 minutes or every hour while you sleep, but there's still things. It's like you get home at night and you don't want to change your pump, or you don't want to take your shot, or you don't want to care. And it's literally just, you feel almost abused because you want to just live life, and then there's this thing pulling you back to reality. But in your situation, it's even more frequent. It was even more of a situation where it's like, if you miss like three things to do, that's 3 things in one night, and therefore that's going to affect however many more chain events after that. Like, that's such a brutal situation. I don't think very many people can understand to the gravity of how much you had to battle every single day. Not even the whole fundraising part of it, but just battling to get to that point is amazing and insane and beautiful and all of it.
Yeah, it's the aspect of just survival. It's amazing what the body and mind is capable of that you don't even realize when you're just trying to survive. The body goes into this mode of survival, and it does whatever it needs to do If you decide you want to survive, it will do what it needs to do to survive. And it is
Mm-hmm.
the body is an amazing, amazing thing. What it can live through, what it can survive,
Mm-hmm.
and what it can handle. And um, I really learned that, and I've seen it firsthand. um, because again, I was told it was impossible for me to be alive. It was impossible for my blood sugars to be that low for that long. And it's just, I'm like, well, then why am I here? If it's such an
Mm-hmm.
impossibility, then why am I here? And I'm doing my best. And so that's where I was. And they had the money, and I got listed for transplant. And then I was told I just had to wait. And so I just had to wait.
So I mean, first of all, what a law of attraction, of you finally you got that one honorable and anonymous donation, and then it just one thing led to another. You just kept rolling in, and you were building momentum. Life was building momentum around you. You were dancing and moving with life, and then through all this momentum, then you gotta stop and wait. How did that feel?
I think that was one of the hardest parts,
Mm-hmm.
because you're told, okay, you need to have your phone, and then you need to have two other people on the list, and you need to have this call list, and you need to have a caretaker, and there's all these things that you need to have in order.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately I had it in order. Like, everything is good to go. Everyone had to take a class. So everyone knew what was going on. They had to, they would go through the recovery process. I had everything prepared for that. I had something set up for my dog. So like when I got called in, he'd be taken care of. Like, I had everything ready to go. And it could have been up to a 5-year wait list.
Wow.
And they said, expect the call tomorrow or for up to 5 years. And I was like, well, I'm I was told I'm not supposed to live past 2 years, and like, we're getting closer to that time. And so my whole thing to focus just on not caring so much just about everything. I'm going to lessen my doctor's appointments. Just like, my whole thing was just to get the stress and like to get my body ready for, if I got that call, I would be ready. I wouldn't be in a state of low blood sugar where I couldn't respond to phone calls, where I was going to be ready and prepared and able, and just looking forward to that phone call. And so it went from me going to doctor's appointments, how am I going to get a ride? Who's going to help take care of me? Who's going to look out for me? To consolidating it down to, okay, now I know what I am looking forward to is this call. Whatever happens afterwards is going to happen, and I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's just this one call. And so life just really calmed down. And I really had this just sense of peace because of how much I had been through, knowing that all I needed was that call. And it was a pretty interesting thing where I didn't have anxiety. It was very peaceful, knowing that I was in good hands with the Mayo Clinic. They knew what they were doing. And in terms of waiting, it wasn't like this impatient, like, oh my gosh, when's that phone gonna ring? When's that phone gonna ring? It's gonna ring when it's gonna ring. And in the meantime, I need to keep myself busy by checking my blood sugars, listening to my CGM, making sure that my dog is happy and alerting me, and just trying to stay as conscious as possible from those low blood sugars. And that's kind of like where my whole focus went. So that's probably where my focus should have been the entire time when I was going through this, but I had to deal with all the doctors and get the transplant, figuring out what was wrong with me. And so it gave myself some time to ponder and to think and to really prepare for the potential of a successful transplant.
Wow. Having life slow you down is such a lesson that so many of us, especially here in the States, could learn, myself included. and it seems like you accepted that lesson with grace, opposed to increase your anxiety, like you kind of said. What do you think about that? Was it just because the confidence of how much things just kind of came to one after another and just felt like blessings, or was there something you told yourself to try to switch your mindset of this, how am I going to survive? Because the survival mode in the brain, in the limbic brain, is so different than being at a restful, peaceful, parasympathetic state. So what about those moments, once you got the money, you got everything kind of in place to, now let's just wait? What about that? What happened there to really accept that?
I think for me, it was knowing that I did every single thing that I could, and there was nothing else I could do. I couldn't cause, my organ was to come from someone who passed away and had the same exact blood type as me, that was in my the zone of where I was for the transplant list, of where I was listed. All the cards had to be played right, and I wasn't wishing for someone to die, and so there was nothing else I could do. Everything was in order. Everything was paid. I think it was just knowing I did absolutely every single thing I could. I had everything organized, and it allowed me just to have that moment of just like a breath of fresh air, to just sit and stop and wait for that next step, because it was out of my control at that point. There was nothing else I could do.
Wow. Grady, you got something?
Yeah, I mean, what was that next step? When did you get that call?
So I was listed in, I want to say, late October of 2018. And every month, when you're on the transplant list, every month you have to go give a sample for an HLA. So when they already know your blood type, and then they under the microscope, they put the bloods together, the two blood samples, mine and the donors, and they see how they react. And if the HLAs do not react well, they know that it's not going to be a successful organ transplant. And so I did my October one, I did my November one, I just did my December one. So I think I was listed. And then I got the day after Christmas, December 26th, in the evening, I got the phone call, and it was from a 480 area code, which was Mayo Clinic. And I was like, oh, someone's calling me. And the only people that would call me were people that I would know. So I was like, I wonder what this is about. So I answered it, and on the other line, the lady says, "Are you ready for a new pancreas?" Like, hey, your name is called, like, come on down. And wow. I was like, are you serious? Like, are you serious? She goes, yes, we have a brain dead donor that is an exact match. We're currently harvesting the organ. Can you be here within 2 hours? And I said, yes, I can. And so she said, okay, come in. And so I was actively listed for 2 months. Officially 2 months, and I got the call the day after Christmas in 2018 to go in for the organ transplant. And so the interesting thing is with transplants is that they tell you you'll probably get called in a good 3-4 times and get ready for surgery, because they prepare you for surgery, and then the organ arrives and they look at the organ and see if it's going to work, if anything happened during travel, and all that kind of stuff. And so I was like, this is probably a practice run, because it's too soon, right? This is too soon. And I got in there, and they said, everything looks good. And so by the time I walked in the hospital, it was about 9:30 at night, I believe. The ER, the emergency room, doors opened, and they were just waiting for me. They're like, come on, hurry up, run. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like what am I, what is going on? And they're like, take off your clothes. And I'm like, where? They're like, right now, start taking them off. And I'm like, taking off my shirt, taking off my pants. And so like I put the thing on. So I guess that they had the organ already for a while. So I don't know where it came from. And so I'm sitting there, they're drawing blood out of both arms. I'm answering all the questions, like, when did you last take your medication? They need to know, they need to make sure that they have all the labs processed. And within like 5 minutes, they had processed all the labs. And I was like, how is this even possible? And then you have the anesthesiologist coming in, you have everyone coming in and talking to you. And then the surgeon walked in, and what the surgeon said, and it just completely calmed my nerves when she walked in, because I didn't even notice. And she said, "Where's Boone?" And Boone is my service dog that I had with me at all my appointments. And she remembered his name. And she was the surgeon that I had met for my consultation months earlier. And when I was like, "Are you my surgeon?" She was like, "Yeah. And I'm going to go ahead and do the surgery because it's a perfect match." It was like, I don't know what, like, nirvana, I don't know what the right word is, but it was like the most peaceful feeling came over me. Like I was at the right place at the right time with the right person, and they were ready for me. And so she says, "I'm going to go back, and we're going to bring you back any minute now, and we're going to transplant you." And within 20 minutes of me arriving at the hospital, I was under anesthesia getting ripped open for the pancreas transplant.
Wow. Yeah, hearing that story, hearing them tell you to run, I'm like, what are they trying to do? Give you a low blood sugar?
Well, yeah, well, and that was the thing, and I was like, well, what if I go hypo? They're like, we have everything to take care of it. Don't worry, we'll be testing your blood sugar the whole time. And like that was my whole concern, because I had my CGM on me, I had a pump on me, I had like all these things. Like, no, they're the anesthesiologist ripped it out. He goes, "You don't need this anymore." He ripped it out, and I was like, "Don't throw that away. I need that pump."
Yeah.
And so like. It's a moment of chaos, and
how traumatic.
when they're ready, they're ready. Let me tell you.
Wow.
Yeah, and that is an experience. Like when I think back on it, I mean, it was just crazy. And I just, you just listen to whatever they say. They're very organized. They're with it. They know exactly what they want to do. And if they have the organ that they think is going to work, hell or high water, they're going to get you in there, and they're going to get you ready for it. And so I was used to going into surgeries out of, like, I was in just such pain from my kidney. And when I would wake up, I would be in such pain because they'd fill your body with gases, and to do all the laparoscopic surgeries and stuff like that. And it always hurt. And when I woke up from this surgery, I was all alone. It was very early in the morning. The surgery was about 6 hours. And there was one nurse poking my stomach. And so I woke up naturally without someone yelling in my face, "Brandon, wake up, Brandon, wake up." And I kind of woke up, and I felt great. And I said, "Was the transplant successful?" And she says, "Yeah, your blood sugar is 84. And like my mind was blown, because that was the first time my blood sugar had been above 40 in almost a year and a half.
Holy
I would
cow.
function at an average blood sugar of 40.
Wow.
And so she says the transplant is working. It's producing insulin. Your blood sugar is stable. We're testing it every minute. And it was too good to be true. Like I was like, am I dreaming? Is like what is going on? Like, and everything happened exactly how it was supposed to.
Wow.
That's purely insane. So were you in California then, or how far away were you from the hospital in Arizona?
I was in Arizona. So for that 2 months from the time I got listed to the time I got called, I was pretty much home. I didn't leave. I couldn't drive for my blood sugars and all that kind of stuff. But because of Christmas and the holidays, I had two friends from college who were home. They didn't go anywhere. And they're like, we're going to go up to the mountains. And I was like, nope, we're not, because they don't have service and it's too far away. And they said, no, we're taking you out of the house for Christmas. And so it was just under 2 hours away. It's a town called Flagstaff in Arizona. And so we went up there for Christmas, and it was kind of just hanging out. They knew my my low blood sugars. I would sip on juice, the orange Gatorades the whole time to keep my blood sugar up. And if my blood sugar went down, they knew how to give me glucagon and call emergency. So I felt safe around them. But they were right. I needed to get out of the house. It was important. But it just so happened that I was up in Flagstaff when I got the call. And so that was the question. Could I have been there in 2 hours? And yeah, we got there in 2 hours driving 95 down the freeway
Oh, wow.
to get me there. And so it was just, yeah, it was one of those things where it happened because it was meant to be, whether it be from will or whether, it be a miracle, whatever it is, it happened because it was meant to happen. There's no other way to explain any of that kind of stuff.
Amazing. What like almost divine intervention or will or all of it. I mean, you were right place at the right time. You had so much momentum building for you. And how many lessons have you learned along that part of that chapter, of that story, to get to that moment, all to wake up with a nurse poking your stomach and you asking, did it work? And she said, yeah. And what a cool end of that first part of that saga. That's purely amazing. So now with this, I think we should probably clarify too, because I'm not a surgeon. I don't fully know. You keep saying that a pancreas-only transplant is very rare, and you said now you have two pancreas or pancreas in your body. So can you kind of talk about why that surgery is a little bit different? Why they didn't remove the other one, and how that's different from maybe a swap. I'm not sure the technical term of that at the top of my head, but can you just elaborate a little bit more on that part of it too?
Yeah. So the pancreas transplant is rare because it's a very, very delicate organ. They compare the organ to transplanting 2 pieces of tissue paper and Jello. And so if it gets a small blood clot, if you fold it the wrong way, there's so many things that can go wrong with it that hospitals just simply don't like transplanting them, because they've been doing them for over 40 years, but the risk is too big for those success numbers. And so the other thing is that diabetics becoming a brittle diabetic is very rare. That alone is very rare. And so this treatment for brittle diabetes is so rare that they do less of 100 of them per year. If you look it up, look up like how many pancreas transplants are done per year in the United States, pancreas only, because generally when you get a pancreas is you get it with a kidney, because you're a diabetic, your kidneys went out and they can give you both of the organs at the same time. And then your rejection rate is much lower because when you have both organs, the body isn't trying to fight them nearly as much. And so it's more successful. And the reason why it's not covered by insurance is because in the Affordable Care Act, a pancreas-only transplant is an optional coverage, where every other organ, a kidney, a liver, a lung, a heart, are all necessary organs, and a pancreas isn't, because you can control it with insulin or diet. And so it's an optional coverage that Medicare, Medicaid, or most insurances do not cover. You can find exceptions very rarely, and I tried and I sued, and it didn't work. And while it's medically necessary and they cover medically necessary things, it's an optional coverage, and they simply don't have to cover it. And then when it comes to them actually with transplants, they don't remove the organ and replace a new one, because what they found is you have a better success rate. And this is the same with kidneys. They leave your old kidneys in as well. By leaving the old organs in, the body is under less stress. And so when they unattach the necessary parts, but they let everything else, like the blood flow and everything, go, stick with the old organs. So your pancreas is behind your stomach and your intestines, kind of, it's behind that and your back. It's a very hard organ to get to surgically. So in order to remove that, it would be very difficult, number one. And then number two, they put the transplanted pancreas. Let me try to put it in your head in the right way. So if you were to take your right hand and put your index finger at your belly button, and then move your hand down all the way down all the way down one hand and to the right one hand, kind of like in the corner of that little crux of the corner of the hip, where your small intestines are, they attach the pancreas to the small intestines, and they attach the arteries to the two main arteries that are running through your leg. And so that's what feeds it the blood, and then it attaches to the small intestines instead of the stomach. And that's what they found to be the most successful place to attach it. So they are able to take some of the small intestine from the donor and attach it to help keep it alive and going. And so they keep the old ones in to have less shock on the body. And then where they place them is the best place in the body that they can find, instead of just reattaching them to the same spots within the body.
Wow. So with that traumatic of a surgery, and when you woke up, kind of fast forwarding a little bit, have you ever met the family of the individual who passed away, and then you ended up taking his or her pancreas?
No. And I haven't, because I don't, number one, my transplant still isn't considered a success. It has successfully been transplanted, but I have been in rejection 4 times, and I just got treated I was in the hospital and I got treated for rejection last month. So it's not considered a fully successful transplant yet. So I don't want to give false information to anybody.
Sure.
And number 2, it's done through a third party, and the other family has to also reach out, and then they would put us in touch. And at one point, I think I will be ready for that. But I look at it from my point of view, and my point of view is, if somebody was able to use any part of me to better their life, I am very happy for that. I don't need to know who that is or who it goes to. There are a lot of people who care because it saved their life, and they're very emotional about it, and they want to know. And there's a lot of families who want to know where the organs went to and stuff like that. And so I will at some point, but I have not reached that point yet. And the gravity of the organ donation, and knowing that I am alive because someone died, does not escape me. I am very aware. And that is what makes me so thankful every single day, because I am able to live because someone else gave me part of them when they passed away. That's a pretty powerful move to be able to go out with as a person. And so that's why it's so important to be an organ donor, because you get to save people's lives, which is pretty amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. So with this, you woke up from surgery. How was the recovery process from the surgery?
So the recovery process for me was about 8 weeks. My second or third week in, I started my first round of rejection. At 6 weeks, I then went into another round of rejection, which they treat with high dose steroids or thymoglobin. There's like 4 or 5 different drugs they treat it with. And my body responded to it well. And but then they have to keep a closer eye on you. So what the recovery consists of is you letting your body heal. And then you go into the clinic and you get your blood work drawn, and you see a doctor about the results, and they look at everything for 6 weeks, 3 times a week. So it's basically going to the doctor constantly. And then as things improve and they know that you're doing better and you're getting active and you're getting your staples removed and everything's healing well, then they start encouraging you to be more active and start exercising and all that kind of stuff. And so I would say I was in month 2, I was with a physical therapist because all my muscles from all the hypoglycemia and stuff had been atrophied. It was bad. And we started on balance. And so I would say I was healed by month 2, well enough to have started working on my body. Mentally, I felt great right away. I was ready to conquer the world. I felt like Superman. I was like, when can I plan my first vacation? You know what I mean? But physically it takes a toll. The drugs are extremely strong that you take every day to suppress your immune system. They are not kind on the body. They have terrible side effects. And to get the dosing right is very difficult. And then going through the rejection treatments aren't fun. It brings up a lot of things like, what did I do wrong? Did I eat something wrong? Did I catch a virus? Like, what's going on? And so there's a lot to process. But the healing process for that is the longest out of all the surgeries I had. And that's because they got to open you completely up, remove your intestines, and attach everything. Well, while I wasn't in a lot of pain, it just took a long time to heal because I'm cut from my sternum to about 2 inches below my belly button. And so all that had to heal back up.
Wow, that's a lot long, and I'm sure it's a continual process. So how many medications or drugs are you on right now just to maintain?
So there's 3 main ones that you take to suppress the immune system, and we're constantly switching those out. But you take prednisone, that's one of the main ones, and then you take a myfortic acid, a mycophenolate, and you take a tacrolimus, and those are kind of like the 3 main drugs that you take that have been around for quite a while that suppress it. But because my immune system is a fighter, they got to keep switching me out meds because I keep maxing out on the doses of everything, and then my body becomes toxic. So they're trying to find the right med to give me 2 months later to suppress my immune system enough that it won't keep trying to fight the organ.
I gotcha. And you said there's quite a bit of side effects from it. What kind of side effects did you get?
I mean, the biggest one is no immune system. So if I catch a cold, I have a cold for about 2 months. Your body just takes longer to heal. As a diabetic, everything just takes longer to heal in general. Just times it by 4. So like if I get a bruise, it's there for a long time. And then it completely destroys because it's killing your T cells in your body, or it's preventing them from doing anything. So your body can't heal. And like the mycophenolate basically destroys your GI system. And so like your stomach, you always have an upset stomach. You always just feel nauseous. And then the tacrolimus destroys your kidneys. And so you have to make sure you're drinking a gallon of water a day, and you really feel it. And then the prednisone, you can't sleep. You get all the puffiness. There's a lot of things that go with it. But I'm not complaining. I'll take that all day long. I don't care. But my point by making that is for all the diabetics who think that, oh, the transplant just save, it will allow them to eat whatever they want. They don't have to take insulin. Let me just tell you, I would rather go back to being a well-controlled diabetic than to have been through everything that I've been through, than to have be stuck taking these meds that I have to take every day and have weekly blood work to make sure the levels are within a therapeutic system within my blood, and to worry about everything that's going on. And I have to make sure I drink filtered water, and it's not that it's terrible. It's just it was way more easier just being on the pump than to have had than to have gone through all that kind of stuff. But and now that I have been through it all, and noticed that you can't really find someone else who had went through what I did online anywhere, because I looked for them. I looked for anyone that had been through what I went through. I now am able to talk to people about it and share information about it and raise awareness about it, because there's probably a lot of people who don't get to see the right doctors that pass away from brittle diabetes because their doctor is unaware. And if I can just get awareness to people just by telling my story, I at least think that I'm able to give back and give some help to people and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of like where everything has led me down, is to, as a diabetic, don't bank on an organ transplant to, be your saving grace. Allow it to be a last chance scenario if you ever could ever want one, because you don't. And then the other thing is just to raise awareness about it and let people know that, yeah, they're out there, but it's not the route you want to take in life.
Have you had anybody in similar situations or pretty dang close to yours since you started being more vocal about it and sort of sharing your story more? Has anyone reached out to you with a similar scenario that you went through?
Yes, except none of them had to pay for transplants. So I don't know if they had insurance that covered it or what circumstance it was. A lot of people get kidneys and pancreas at the same time, because if you're getting another organ, the pancreas is considered an addition, and so it's covered by insurance. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people get the pancreas, and they'll talk about it. But I've only met 2 other pancreas-only transplant patients out of the thousands of people I've spoken to over the past 2 years. And so, yeah, like when I say it's rare, it's pretty rare. And people are just like I wasn't really aware of it, of it actually being a thing. I don't think that the medical profession is just aware of it actually being an actual treatment as well. So yeah, I mean, it really is. It's one of those things that it's kind of crazy. And also, brittle diabetes is very rare. People are diagnosed as brittle diabetics when they really aren't. I'm not taking away anything from anybody who is diagnosed as one, but it's not a diagnosis that you want either.
Yeah. I mean, both Dr. Grady and I are not like trained as a medical doctor, but I can say with confidence, between all the books and textbooks and all the other education that I have, brittle diabetes definitely does not come across like, and if it is, it's diminished as like just a lack of will and management. It's such a rare, like, it's like, oh, your low blood sugar is because your pump settings have been wrong this whole time. And, you've been, I think it's easy. Well, the quality or value, I think that we try to express is to have control and to have self-reliance with your diabetes, and to take ownership of it. But to do that at the same time, you run the risk of realizing or overcompensating and thinking you can control everything, which isn't true. There's this part of diabetes that makes it very, very hard to know what's going to happen next. And you can't control everything all the time, and you got to let go sometimes. And I think it turn into a toxic relationship with yourself, depending on how you view your blood sugar, how you view your numbers. A lot of people get wrapped into the A1C number and their self-worth in the numbers and things like that. And so to even be considered brittle diabetic might be like, oh, you just don't know what you're doing. And that's most simply not the case for you by any means. You know, I can't even imagine having the fear of not being able to drive, you know, the way that you were living for so long. So crazy scenarios for you leading up to that point.
Yeah. And and I think that people are very, we're very fortunate in today's day and age with the CGMs and the technology and how much can be told to you about diabetes. And, a lot of people they're given insulin when their pancreas is still producing insulin. And it's just, I'm like, what on earth are you doing? And just like you said, like, you have a toxic relationship with your A1C and your blood sugar and stuff like that. And when I look back at it, I'm just like, give yourself some some freaking leg room, be okay. Just ride the wave. Your line doesn't have to be straight, like it can be wavy. It's okay. You're going to be just fine. And your A1C shouldn't be lower than a normal human being's A1C. It doesn't mean that you're doing any favors for yourself or your body. And,
right.
And yeah, and I mean, it's very true. And I think that, social media pushes that. It's that gold trophy that you get a show of how great, you met the goals. And that's great. And that is an awesome goal. But also you have to take into consideration how much work and effort is going into that. And that is being taken away from living life and enjoying it and not being so obsessed about testing your blood sugar and all that kind of stuff. So, oh yeah, it's an interesting concept, and doctors are getting more obsessed with it as well. And it's turning into a very strange thing.
Now, so you started to do PT, you started to rebuild, atrophied muscles, and you've now, by the time you left the hospital, you fought rejection twice. So at this point then, once you finally leave the hospital, what then? How does it feel then to be on all these immunosuppressants and continuing life? And how are your energy levels? How is it? Did you still want to check your blood sugars? How was that, those first few moments and months post-surgery, post being released, post-op? How did those go for you?
So in terms of checking the blood sugar, because here's the way I look at it, because this is what I'm always asked. Did you eat cake? Did you have, did you eat some sugar? Because they just think, okay, suddenly you don't have to worry about that anymore. And like, that was like the last thing on my mind. I'm absolutely just thinking, am I taking my medication on time? Did I set them out correctly? Am I doing that all? Am I doing that all right? But I wanted to get back to life, and I needed to start just building. I started with balance. I had to start physical therapy, learning how to balance again. And that's where I started. And then my goal was to keep working up until the hospital told me that I was stable enough and I could transfer hospitals to California, where where my parents and family live. And be closer to them, because I was all alone in Arizona. And then I moved to California 9 months after transplant. And right when I did that, I started going through rejection again and had that treated. And then, so then it just goes to starting to live life. It's kind of like, do I return to the work that I was doing, which is super stressful? Or do I try to find something else? Do I find what works? And I kind of found like a hybrid solution to making money, to paying my bills, and to keep my mind and body happy and healthy, because that matters to me far more than making X amount of dollars per month and per year, which is kind of what I was going for before in life. So it really changes just like your perspective and an outlook for me. And so, yeah, so for me, it was all about maintaining health and wellness. And that's kind of the path that I'm still on. I do what makes me happy. I'm not worried. I'm not nearly as worried about things as I used to be. Like, what, in 5 years, if I don't meet my goals, what is that going to look like? I'm just like, my goal right now is survival, but not in a bad way. It's about, surviving the day, living it to the best of my abilities. And then when I am told that I have had a successful transplant and I'm stable, then maybe I will consider moving to a different type of job, where now I have a job that I can take and leave if I have to go to the hospital and I get sick, it's okay. It can wait, and those types of things. And a lot of people who had transplants within about a month, they return straight back to work, and they have a different opinion about it. And some people don't go back to work at all, and they choose to live a completely different life. So like in terms of like what I'm doing with my life, for me, it's about living for me and making up for that lost time and enjoying it and not taking anything for granted. And that's what's been working for me.
Yeah, I imagine you have a totally different way of looking at things from going into this whole situation, now coming out the other side. I'm sure just a totally different person with a totally different perspective.
Yeah, and it's strange to say this because I literally went through hell. Like I don't know how else to explain it, because when I look back, I'm like, how did I survive that? I never want to go through that again. That's something that I wouldn't wish on anybody, but it made me such a better person. It made me, like having to become vulnerable and share information and rely on other people and not being afraid to ask for help. And it made me a better person for that. And I am thankful for that. I'm not a victim because of what I went through. I did, it was something I didn't do to myself. This is just part of life. Life doesn't go always to plan. And, I'm just rolling with the punches, and I'm okay with that.
Wow. So what are some active strategies now that you use to roll with punches that continue to strengthen your health and wellness and to the best of your ability? And, you have this interesting position that you're in now with being on immunosuppressants. You actually don't want to do things to strengthen your immune system too much, right? Because you don't want to put your body into start rejecting your pancreas or your new pancreas now. So there are some, like, talking about boosting your immune system is such a hot topic right now, right? And for viruses and everything else. But it's not like you can participate in a lot of these things because you can't have that strong immune system. That's literally the point of your weekly blood draws that you do. So how do you balance health and wellness, staying healthy, while trying to not have an immune system?
Yeah. So for me, this is kind of like after talking to people and with the doctors and doing what is right for me. And that's staying physically active, keeping my body well. And that doesn't mean, I need to have, I need to have this perfect body. That to me is being able to do the things that I enjoy. I love surfing. I surf every single week. I love hiking. I go every single week. I exercise. I am active to the point where I am comfortable doing exactly what I am doing, and I don't run out of breath, and that keeps me healthy. My levels my levels always come back good from my labs because I think I'm doing what makes me physically well. And I think that helps my immune system. I drink a lot of water, and I stay away from crowds of people, and I eat a well-balanced diet, and there really isn't much else I can do. And it just comes back down to just living a healthy lifestyle. And that's what I'm doing. And it's pretty interesting because with everything going on in the world, it made me enjoy the outdoors even more. It forced me to, right? So I got into scuba diving, and like there's like a bunch of little hobbies that I like kind of like picked up and have really been able to enjoy because I started physical therapy, and I started personal training, and I weight train, and I keep my muscle mass up enough to be able to do the things that I enjoy, instead of looking at it differently and saying, nope, I had the pancreas, I can eat what I want, do what I want, and, you know, just go back to and go back to a life where I'm not going to worry about any of that kind of stuff. Like, I know the risks I take. I wear a mask. I stay away from groups of people. I use hand sanitizer like crazy, and I did that before it was cool. And I'm happy with that. And that's the price that I had to pay for the decisions that I made in life. And yeah, and you know, and I'm the happiest I've ever been. You know, some of the greatest things that have ever happened to me have been through the past 2 years, and that I would have never expected ever in my life.
Wow, what a journey. What would, you know, from somewhere along the line of, you know, 16, 20 years old, when you were just battling, you know, being a perfect diabetic, to now, and just think about everything that was going on then, going into college and preparing for your first career as a social studies teacher and doing all these things, the wisdom and the lessons you've gained now, what is there something you would tell yourself, you know, a 20-year-old version of yourself, that, you know, what's like 2 things that you would really like, if you sat down physically with yourself, what would you tell yourself?
The first thing I would tell myself is to worry less. Do not care nearly as much about what other people think, what other people do. If something doesn't go to plan, just don't even worry about it. If you're putting in the work, it will happen the way it's supposed to happen. And the second thing that I would tell myself is to not be afraid to be vulnerable. Because I think as a guy, and I think as someone who grew up with, you know, like I've talked about before, with the diabetes that is looked down upon and all that kind of stuff, you don't want to show weakness. You don't want to show that you have something wrong with you. You don't want people to have pity on you for no reason, and that doesn't matter. And so those are the 2 things that I would tell myself, and it would have drastically changed my point of view and perspective when I was younger in life.
Wow, I think that those are great comments. And that last point, you know, being vulnerable, like you said, as males and as just anybody too, you know, females or whatever have you, is an interesting concept right now, because I think there's this acceptance and people try and talk and communicate how we should be vulnerable. But it's like the second you are, immediately you'll feel the judgment, whether it's through social media, online, or, you know, just how our brains are wired to receive information. And it'll feel still like you're being judged. Maybe you are, maybe you're not, maybe people aren't even paying attention, but it's like second you make that step to be vulnerable, man, it feels like you're on an island, and it can be so easy to retreat and go back. But the second you were vulnerable is when all these blessings came into your life. You know, It was all the momentum of the change came into your life. And because you were brave enough, because that's really what it is. You got to be brave enough to be vulnerable. That's when everything, you know, so much just rolled from there. And I think that's a beautiful thing to tell, you know, a younger version of yourself, and something that for all of us to hear too.
Yeah. And I just want to like add on to that point. Being vulnerable doesn't mean that, oh, you just get your way. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, people are going to hate on you, and you're going to get comments, and but it also shows you that if you really need help, it's okay to ask for help, because there are people out there who they don't know that you need help until you ask. You know, they're not out there saying, if you need help, just ask, you know, like they're unaware that you need help, and they don't know how to help you because they don't know you need help. And so sometimes you have to make that ask in order to receive what you want. And it for how like dumb it sounds, it actually it benefits people. So it does. It comes with negatives, but the benefits outweigh them significantly.
Agreed. Grady, got anything as we kind of wrapping up?
Yeah, I've got a couple, a question and just a comment, but I'll ask you the question first. So now that you have the transplant, I'm just curious, do you still check your blood sugar? How often do you check it? And do they still check your A1C? And how are all those things? Because, and I'm also just kind of curious, like when you're checking it, is it like just like a non-diabetic where it's like perfect every time you check it, or do you have some fluctuation still?
So at first I refused to check my blood sugar because they were doing it every 3 days. I was just like, nope, if there's a problem, they'll know. But I ran into getting low a couple times still, like having hypoglycemia, and just like a normal person, a non-diabetic has hypoglycemia, and I still have it. So I don't test my blood sugar regularly, but if I'm not feeling well, I'll test it to see if it's a hypo, you know, if it's hypo, or if it's something else. And the highest my blood sugar has ever been, I think was 120, I think, but it runs between 65 and 75. And so anytime I test it, I think I'm low, it'll be like 83 or 72. And it's shocking to me, because you just expect the number to come back just off, and you're like, oh, but I'm going to have to correct for it. And, it doesn't. And so the body, even with a transplant, does amazing things. Even taking prednisone, which, is supposed to make your blood sugar higher and all that kind of stuff, it works itself out. I did have to wear CGMs twice, because to check on the hypoglycemia, just to kind of see how often it's happening when I'm not testing my blood and stuff like that. And I did one with the Libre, and I did one with the Dexcom, and 2 or 3 times a week, my blood sugar goes into the 50s. And it has nothing to do specifically with if I'm fasting or if I'm eating. It just does it. It dips, and then it comes right back up. So and what they were explaining to me in the hospital is that what is likely happening is how the liver creates glucogen, and it helps raise the blood sugar in diabetics and non-diabetics when your blood sugar starts going down. What they were saying is that my glucogen probably hasn't built up enough yet because I had hypoglycemia for so long. But once it does, I shouldn't have those little hypoglycemia episodes anymore. And then my blood sugar will regulate out way more. So yeah, for the past 2 years, my blood sugar has been sitting below like the normal, that golden number of 100. Well, mine doesn't even get that high. And it's just, to me, it blows my mind because I don't feel low. I don't get the tingly fingers or the cold sweat or anything like that. I feel good. And I'll tell you, it's a really dumb saying, but it feels good to feel good. And I've never been able to say that before.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know, myself included, I know a lot of people, I'm sure, listening, just hearing the fact that you now have stable blood sugars, are like, just feel super excited for you, and also probably maybe a little bit jealous. But at the same time, like you said, it wasn't a great process to go through, and you're still kind of going through a lot right now. So by no means, I'm sure nobody necessarily envies you, but at the same time, it's great to hear that at least you have one part of your life under control again.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And it's funny because, I was an insulin dependent type 1 diabetic for 31 years. That is a long time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I've paid my due diligence in there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just commenting, because as we're going along, I was just trying to think through how your body got from being able to be under control to all of a sudden having these constant lows. And so just thinking out loud, I was just thinking about, well, maybe through the process of your surgeries, it somehow affected, whether damage chemically or physically, the alpha cells in your pancreas, or just the production of glucagon from your pancreas, to then be able to raise your blood sugar again. Because to be constantly fighting the lows, it wasn't like it somehow turned your pancreas on to where it was now injecting a bunch of insulin in your body. But maybe it affected how well your body was able to then bring your blood sugar back up. So just kind of thinking out loud there, that was the best theory I could think of just on the spot there. But
Yeah. Cool. So then, Brandon, we like to end the podcast with a burst my beta cells segment. So this can be blood sugar related or not. In your case, this could be insurance related. This could be not even health related. But what's something that bursts your beta cells? I guess hopefully not too much of your new pancreas, because you need those beta cells now. But what bursts your beta cells here recently?
The things that burst my beta cells, it's specifically recently, is how. Let me try to put it in a politically correct manner. How duplicitous people are with the way that they say they live their life versus how they actually live their life. And this has to do with the pandemic. And I'm not saying it because I am mad at people. I am just saying it that, you present yourself one way and it's, oh my gosh, I refuse to do this, I refuse to do that. And meanwhile, they're posting pictures of them at family events, Christmas events, what they're going to be doing for New Year's, them at, out having parties, which is totally fine. Go and do that. But then don't get mad at somebody for doing the exact same thing. So that is what really burst my beta cells lately, let me tell you.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I definitely have seen a lot of that. And there's a lot of like self-integrity checks that are going on, with that kind of stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Haven't thought about it that way. What about you, Grade? Oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's just one of those things that I just noticed lately. It's like people calling other people out, and it's like, yeah, but really, like, you're doing the same exact thing. Come on now.
Sure.
yeah, I definitely, I see a lot of that too. But for me, lately, bursting my beta cells has been technology. So we've been trying to do a lot with this podcast, both with websites and just posting the podcast. Our last podcast was supposed to be posted before Christmas, and I just posted it, I think, last night, because there was just a mess of just technology failures, and it has been frustrating. So that has been really bursting my beta cells lately.
Yeah, and that one, the original edit was Dr. Grady was actually singing Jingle Bells in the beginning of that episode, but that's what made the whole podcast shut down. So yeah,
it just crashed everything.
Oh man. Burst my beta cells recently. I think just more so than not, I've been more frustrated again with just insurances and things like that. And to hear part of your insurance story, to say, although it's medically necessary, it's not it's essentially an optional coverage, is absolutely ridiculous. You know, I heard when you said that, I was like, that's so messed up. And continuing to be on insurance companies, it's such a system that's designed for confusion and decide for not the patient's best interest, but definitely the people working the insurance industry. Now, it's all that being said, you know, insurance allows us to move forward and to have coverage and do so many things here. But man, it's such a racket, and it's hard to feel like it's not set up against you when there's so many barriers. And I'm starting to almost talk to them, even with my patients, as you know, paper hurdles of like what's stopping you, what's something. It shouldn't be something that stops you from getting the care and live the life that you should live, is that kind of stuff. And that's been just more and more frustrating to me these days. But and then, since that's almost like a negative aspect of it, let's flip it to, and you know, I guess adapting it, because typically we use the phrase like, how do you live free, or how do you feel empowered, you know, from your diabetes. So I'm trying to think of a phrase real fast that would, I guess, fit your situation. But just what's been empowering you recently to continue to be moving forward?
You know, in spite of everything, whether it just be insurance, what's going on with people personally, what's going on in the world, with all that kind of stuff, you know, we're still alive, we're still kicking, and that is something to be grateful for and empowered about every single day, because we get to live. We're alive, and that is something to really be grateful for, and a reason to live, and to do things. I don't know. It's just, it really is. It's really the whole living thing. It is taken for granted. When you kind of look at it in a different perspective, it's like, wow, I'm alive. I'm gonna live it up.
I love that. Yeah. I've been feeling free just because I've been able to move my body recently in the way that, you know, I've been really missing, whether both in the gym and just mobility wise, flexibility wise, feeling confident that I can handle certain things. And sometimes with being diabetic, you know, you feel like you can't do that. Or I remember back when I was in high school, I thought I wanted to be a firefighter, but I thought I couldn't do that with low blood sugar, you know. And so being able to move and handle situations, I've just been feeling really confident with that kind of stuff right these days. But what about you, Grade?
Well, my diabetic kind of freedom or win has just been today, which is just being back on a normal schedule, because I was off for a week in Arizona with my family, and I didn't necessarily eat that terribly different, but at the same time, the schedule was just way different. And so being off your schedule obviously makes controlling your blood sugar is harder. So I appreciated being on a schedule today, having my normal routine of eating and what I'm eating and all that stuff, being back to normal. And just today, I've noticed just a big difference in the ease of which I was able to control my blood sugar. So I'm glad to be back in a routine again.
Nice. So, Brandon, before we really wrap up, I want to take a second and thank you, and kind of almost reiterate that you have a book coming out sometime in the future, undisclosed date. But the title is the working title is "I'm Still Kickin." Is that, or tell us a little bit about the upcoming book for people to hear more about your story?
Yeah, so the book is called "I'm Still Kickin'." Has been my phrase for the longest time, and it's just my journey. Of what we touched on is the tip of the iceberg, and so the whole thing is motivational. It's about overcoming obstacles, and the whole point of it is for me to go and speak to people and let them know that they're not alone in fighting this battle. They're not alone with diabetes, with organ transplantation, with chronic illness. And the other thing is to raise awareness about it. And the book is just to help with that. But the goal is that it gets put out at the same time that I can go talk to people. And until I can go talk to people, the book is on hold. So it's a working title. Yeah, it's a working title because things might change between now and when it gets released. But until then, I get to share my story with people like you, and it at least gives me a platform to help motivate and educate myself and others with new information, and hopefully empower people a little bit.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I definitely think everyone listening to this will feel inspired and empowered. Brandon, if they wanted to learn more and connect more with you, or what's the best way to reach you and interact with you?
Best way to reach me. I am most active on Instagram, and that's on BrandonMouwOfficial.com. And my last name is spelled M as in Mary, O-U-W, Brandon Mouw. Or BrandonMouw.com. It has all of my information on there. And if you want to know more about the book, sign up for my email list. You're not going to get any emails from me outside of just like, welcome to my email list. And because I want to know where people are located and where I can go and speak and meet people and stuff like that when it's safe to do so. And so please message me, email me, whatever. I answer every message, every email, everything. Even if it's you think is the dumbest question or the most rude question, there's a reason to know about it. And I'm here. I'm in the public to answer those questions because I couldn't find anyone else that went through what I went through. And so hopefully I can help people on their journey.
Right on. Beautiful. Any last things you want to kind of share with any of our listeners, Brandon?
Yes. I want to tell your listeners to don't give up. Do whatever it takes to keep on kicking. And even if life seems terrible today, the sun will still rise tomorrow. So do whatever it takes to hang on.
Love it. Love it. Well, thanks, Brandon, so much for joining us. It was great to meet with you and to hang out with you and talk with you for a bit. And thanks, everyone, for listening. And we'll catch everyone on the next episode of the Diabetes Podcast.
See ya.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found value in today's conversation, we would appreciate it if you gave a 5-star review. It really helps us branch out our community and get our message across to those who really need to hear it. If you want to interact with us on social media, you can follow us on the Diabetes Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Or if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or moral outrages, you can email us at thediabetiespodcast@gmail.com. Thanks.